What if you could take that risk, make that change, reach that goal, live your best life? Welcome to another episode of the What If You Could podcast, where we get together with amazing experts and everyday people who share challenges, encourage healing, and explore the possibilities that life has to offer. I'm your host, Gary Scott, and I'm excited that you're along for the ride. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another episode of What If You Could. And the sparkling, glowing young lady next to me is my friend Lisa Franz. How are you, Lisa?
I am fantastic. Thank you for having me, Gary. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, this should be fun. We'll have some fun. I love that you're standing up. You got your mojo working. You look good, right? So we're
Thank
ready to
you.
go. So I'm just going to read your quick bio real quick, and then we'll fire it off.
Perfect.
Awesome. Okay. Lisa Franz has an M.Sc in exercise science, health promotion, and nutrition. She is the owner and head coach of Nutrition Coaching and Life and the host of Nutrition and Life podcast. After struggling through various diets herself, Lisa learned about the evidence-based ways to change weight and body composition and has been fascinated with nutrition and building muscle ever since, especially as a digital nomad originally from Germany, now in Colombia, and someone who loves to travel and explore 53 countries and counting. That's a lot of countries. She feels like the right knowledge, and when it comes to nutrition and training, has provided her with strategies that allow her to live a life she enjoys in a body that she loves. Lisa aims to show and teach others that the same is possible for them, guiding them away from frustration about food in their bodies towards experiencing joy and contentedness. Who doesn't want joy and contentedness? We all do.
Well, thank you for that lovely introduction. And actually, I am currently in Bolivia. I was in Colombia up until a couple of weeks ago when we arranged for this recording as well. But I had some visa stuff going on in Colombia, so I'm actually now in Bolivia, which is also a wonderful country. Yeah, as you mentioned, I have been traveling for quite some time. I left Germany in 2009 when I moved to New Zealand for an extended period of time, but have been a full-time digital nomad since 2019. So almost 6 years. And that's kind of a good entry point actually into your show where you're asking yourself, or the listeners hopefully are asking themselves as well, what if they could? What if I could? And so I have always had a deep rooted passion for travel, but then my husband at the time took me to or caused me to move to New Zealand. And I was in a full-time employment situation as a police officer there, even though I studied sport and exercise science, as you mentioned. But I kind of shifted gears and decided to become a police officer there for a while. We can get into that later. But anyway, I was working as a police officer there, and I just thought this is somewhat fulfilling in the sense of I'm kind of like as a Aquarius. I don't know how much you are into zodiac signs or whatever, but I'm kind of a humanitarian, and so I do like helping people as a coach that deems well in that area as well. But yeah, so I thought, okay, it's somewhat fulfilling, but at the same time, the shift work is really getting to me. Is this really my tr dream life? Am I truly fulfilled here? And I was like, no, I've always admired people that are able to travel for work or just with their partner or explore the world to the fullest. And at some point, several things came together, and I just thought, what if I could be one of those people that travel the world and live location free? And if at some point I decide to settle somewhere else, that's fine, that there's nothing, absolutely nothing wrong with living in one place or never leaving your hometown for that matter, but it's just not my true nature. And so I thought I started following two girls online at that stage. That was like 2014, 15 or whatever, and Instagram was becoming a little bit more popular. And these two girls, they were called the bucket list bombshells. So two girls that were kind of promoting and creating
Wait, they were
courses.
called the bucket list bombshells?
Oh yes,
That's
yes, that
awesome.
is their name. I have no idea if that page still exists or not, but at that time they were running courses on how to become a digital nomad essentially. And so I mean their main thing was like to be I think it was a web design creator or like something that is truly not in my wheelhouse. Nonetheless, it sparked the thought of me, what if I could work from a pool like they do, go surfing in the morning like they do, pack up their luggage next day and go wherever they want to. And
Yeah.
that really, yeah, kind of motivated me to take action on that because I thought if it's possible for them, it's possible for me. And that's something that I try to live by to this day, but also instill in my clients nowadays when people think, oh, well, she looks healthy, but she has blah 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 blah. No, no, no. If you see something in someone else, it truly means it's possible for you in your version as well. Not saying that at 53, female, 5'2", you can become an NBA basketball star. I'm certainly not saying that. But if you admire something in someone else, you can create your version of that. And I've learned that firsthand, and now I'm also trying to show that to people when it comes to their own aesthetic or their well-being, and just in general encouraging people to live a life that's truly aligned with who they want to be, because we only have one life.
Yeah. Yeah. That is awesome. I mean, I love that whole thing. And we can touch on the police officer thing, but you having been in so many different countries, right? Um, America's diet is just such garbage, right? It's just so void of any nutrition at all. There's nothing. So you might as well eat just your desk. As you travel the world, do you find that people are they're able to eat healthier because of what their country promotes food wise? And you've seen 53 different diets, right? So I mean, do you find that Americans just kind of are already up against the wall nutritionally?
That's a great question. And I mean, I will say that I have actually also spent quite a bit of time in the US. My best friend lives in the US. I have the majority of my clients within the US. That being said, too, though, I do work with people globally. So I've also learned and seen that diets in places like Egypt or Philippines or, wherever are vastly different, even though I haven't actually traveled there. But it is. Not as simple as saying like the US has it worse than everybody else, because there are certainly other things that make it harder for people in different countries. So, for example, if you live in Lebanon, it might be a lot harder to obtain protein powder and low-fat Greek yogurt, or to go to a restaurant and ask for them not to put any dressing on your salad or whatever, versus maybe they have it easier having a little bit more of an active lifestyle, walking around more, incorporating more movement into their daily lives. Yeah, that's certainly a big challenge that I do see within my clients in the US. So I think it's not even just the quality of food that's different, I think, or that makes it difficult for people within the US. I think it goes even deeper when it comes to the systemic influences. So, for instance, last year in November, I traveled back to the US to visit my friend for Thanksgiving. And that was the first year in probably 4 or 5 years, since with COVID and everything else, I just hadn't been able to come and visit her. And one of the first things that really shocked me, so first of all, I went into a huge supermarket. I don't even know what it was, but it was like a mega, super, ultra, whatever. And I literally just went in there for a protein bar. And so, I mean, something that should be reasonably easy to choose. And there were like 85 different kinds of protein bars. And even I was feeling overwhelmed. Like, I, as a nutrition coach, I was feeling overwhelmed with the choice. Like, what do I go for? So I ended up going for something that I was familiar with, the two brands I was familiar with. And I just put myself into the shoes of someone who does not have a nutritional awareness, and put them into any kind of huge grocery store like that and them thinking, okay, what is a healthy choice? Then they might go by what the government recommends, whatever has a healthy tick or says high fiber or whatever, but they don't know. And it makes it choice is great, don't get me wrong. Choice is awesome. Having freedom to choose is amazing, but it to a certain extent, and then it just becomes overwhelming. And the research is very clear that if we're overwhelmed or stressed, we just resort back to what we know, what we're familiar with. Because if you have 5 minutes in the grocery store between picking up your kids and going home and preparing dinner and so on, you're not going to be like, oh, hang on, wait a minute, let me read the nutrition label and see if that has my 23 grams of protein that I require for that meal. You're going to grab whatever. So that was point number one in the sense of more choice is not always better. You might have healthy choices available in the US as well, but it might take a little bit more education and planning to find that. And the second shocking part for me was I was in a gym and I wanted to get to Starbucks, which was literally across the road. I could honestly see the Starbucks, but I could not get there by foot because there was a huge highway separating me from that Starbucks. So I typed into Google, how can I walk there? It would have taken me 23 minutes to walk to said Starbucks versus driving in 2.5 minutes because it was a direct road. And so I'm like, I empathize so dearly for people that say, it's so hard for me to get my steps in. And then you take cultures in Europe, like for instance, my mom, I gave her my Fitbit at some point over the summer when I visited her. I just said, Mom, I just want to see how many steps you get, even unintentionally, because she likes gardening, she cleans the house, she takes the bicycle to her workplace and so on. Without even trying, she got to 12,000 steps in a day. I'm not even joking, like literally. So you have very, very different things there, and it goes beyond just the food choices that really make it difficult for people globally on different scales to obtain the right nutrition or to even learn about the right nutrition. Because nowadays we can't even say it's due to a lack of knowledge. On the contrary, it's often like we get too much information in dissecting what is actually right and what's wrong. That's probably a bigger problem nowadays.
Yeah, yeah. We've been lucky to spend a lot of time in Italy. And I love that. So in America, you go to the store, like you said, and you pick something up and you go, oh, well, it says it's gluten free, so it must be okay because for some reason I'm gluten intolerant. I have no idea why I am, but for some reason I'm gluten intolerant. So I'll buy this gluten free stuff. It turns out it's cotton candy. It's like you don't even, they you know what I mean? The labeling here is such bullshit. They just don't even, it's so fake. Fat free is bad because if it's fat free, that means they've done something stupid. If it's sugar free, it's bad. They've done something stupid, right? And then when we go to Italy, it's like, where's your refrigerator? Where's your freezer? Well, we don't need them. We go down to the market, we get whatever we're going to eat for that day, we fix it, we eat it, and we go back tomorrow. We don't go to Costco and buy 8,000 pounds of crap and put it in your freezer, right? It's a different mentality, but you can do that here in America. There's an abundance, there's a plethora of great food choices. You just have to make them, right?
That's the thing, but yeah, if you're given 100 choices and one of them or two of them are right, it's very different than if you have five choices and one of or two of them are right. But yeah, I mean, Italy is such a beautiful country. I'm sure everybody who's been there will agree. And one of the great things that their culture has, in addition to a more active lifestyle, is also I think that they celebrate their meals more. And by celebrating, I don't mean we were just past Thanksgiving here as we're recording this. I don't mean like, oh, they have more holidays. They probably don't. But I mean, they make a social event out of their dinner, perhaps. And with that, an important point is number one, the preparation. So you put love and time and care into the preparation. Of course, they have the luxury of having that time or taking that time. It's just in their tradition. But also the consumption. So it's more about, oh, we're gonna catch up with Uncle Tio and Uncle blah blah, and everybody eats together. And then you have your first course, maybe it's just a fish starter or so. And then half an hour goes by, you chat and you talk, and maybe you have a glass of wine or whatever. And then you have the main thing, which again you share, but it's more about the sharing and the chatting and the whatever. And then maybe later you have a little bit of dessert with your espresso and that's it. And but that's the event. And that means there is actual care in that food. And as you said, it's has minimal ingredients. It might be the same, it might also be pasta, but it is not the same kind of pasta that you find at Walmart, processed with 100,000 things. So yeah, it's you food is a center for sure, but it's surrounded with this beautiful cushion and blanket of the social life and the talking and the connection that I think is missing in the American culture, but globally in more and more countries, I think it's growing that it's just like food is more about the pleasure that we get from food, but in 10, 15, 20 minutes, and it's got to be a big meal and it's got to be filling. And then after that, that's that. It's a very individualistic sort of a view and task of eating the food as opposed to having that gathering where you put the emotion in there and just a beautiful experience as well.
Yeah. And then when you add to that what it does to your digestion, what it does to your mindset, what it does to
Mhm.
your physicality, instead of coming home to a pizza that's made out of who knows what, and your family sits around, opens a box, hammers down just carbs and sugar and junk, pizza and a Coke, right? Everyone looking at their cell phone, right? So I mean, what is that doing for your overall health, right? Your mental health, your physical health, your nutritional health, everything. And then there it's like you said, you take your time, you talk, you go over things, you discuss, you laugh. In the meantime, your food's digesting, you're going into the next meal. The one thing I've made the mistake, and everyone who makes it goes to Italy is when you sit down and they serve pasta, that is not the entree. All right. There's like eight other meals. There's eight other courses coming. Don't load up on the pasta, everybody. I'm just telling you, right? But you know what I
That's such
mean?
a
That
good
that
point, but yeah,
mental, the whole process. It's not just that the food can be better. It's not just as paired with love, but it's also the process of eating it and enjoying it and that overall health benefit from that.
yeah, 100%. And I mean, people listening, they might be now like, okay, that's cool, but what does that have to do with me? It doesn't necessarily change how I can approach things. But I do want to give a few like practical tips because often it doesn't actually take that much longer to prepare something simple yourself than it does to go through a drive-through or have something pick something up from somewhere. So having an emphasis on home cooked meals, I do think is important. And even if, especially if you have kids, like showing them what's in their food and like what that whole food actually looked like before preparing it. Sometimes kids don't even know anymore what the whole food was initially like. So yes, I think bringing the family together once a day or at least once a week would be a really good place to start. If you're currently like in that habit of everyone's just eating at their own time and everyone is scrolling at the same time, making it a point that at least once a week or ideally once a day, people eat together and you share a little bit about your day as it used to be the practice back in the day, perhaps as well, where we're just saying, hey guys, 15, 20 minutes, that can't be too much to ask for without our cell phones. Let's all sit down together. That would be a really, really good point. And of course, if you're the one preparing or organizing the food, don't think you need to cook a recipe with 20 ingredients. Think of a protein source.
Yep.
Think of one or two vegetable sources that you and your kids like, ideally. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. Most people or families have a couple of vegetables at least that everyone somewhat likes, and then add a healthy carb source like a potato or whatever. And that's it. You can even, if on a really busy week, pick up a rotisserie chicken, your pre-chopped salad, chug the salad dressing, or create a quick salad dressing, and that's good. It doesn't take too long, and nowadays, especially with some beautiful gadgets like you have your slow cooker or whatever. Sometimes it really doesn't require that much time. And we sometimes overthink it in the sense of, oh, what kind of recipe? And then you get caught up 30 minutes browsing throughout recipes, and then in the end, you don't decide anything anymore and end up going through the drive-through again. So think simple. What protein source? What's a vegetable with it? What kind of healthy carb source, a whole source can I have with that? And that's it. Add some lower calorie sauces and spices to mix it up a little bit. And I would say that that goes a really, really long way. And if you're not part, if you're living on your own and you're thinking, well, okay, what can I do in order to eat a little bit more mindfully? I would just say get into the habit of not having the TV on is a good first place also in addition to not scrolling. And even if that might sound a little bit boring, like what do I do while I'm eating? A podcast is still better than having the TV on. And aside from that, like taking a few deep breaths before you eat in the middle of the day. Many of the moms that I work with, they're so busy, they're like even eating at their desk when they're working or shoving in some food while they're driving places. Your body deserves more than that. And you can't really digest properly when you're in that acting state, when you're in that in that sympathetic mode as opposed to your relaxed rest and digest parasympathetic mode. So taking 5 to 10 minutes to have a quick lunch can't be too much to ask. You deserve more. Very, very often I have found that not following through with action on nutrition comes down to not valuing yourself enough, and that's quite sad, I find. So often that's really something that we need to uncover first, in the sense of you deserve to be taken care of. You can only take care of your family, of others, of your job as best as possible when you are being nourished as well.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, you there's so many things you touched on there that I want to go back to, but one of them is just about the food prep and eating. You could take, like you said, you could take that rotisserie chicken. And if you're single or if you're a couple or if you're a family of four, if you're a family of four, you can make a great meal from that with add some steamed broccoli or add some other vegetables and you're eating for less than if you went through the drive-through fast food. People always say, well, I can't eat healthy because it's so much more expensive. It's easier to go get a 99-cent burrito. And that's just not true. I mean, if you wanted to do like we do chicken Caesar salads all the time with the rotisserie chicken, and then we repurpose that. The next day, I have tacos, chicken tacos. I mean, there's still so much left. You can repurpose that to multiple meals, right? So a family of four could have a really yummy chicken Caesar salad for dinner, right, with maybe another little something. And that's you're still at like $2.50 a piece, $3 a piece, right, for that whole meal. So you can't say it would have been cheaper to go through the fast food. It's just not. It's just making the conscious effort to do it. It doesn't take more time than driving down there. The second thing I want to touch on that is the purposefulness. The mental, I like how you bring in the physical and the mental. And that's a big part of this. Yeah, I want to get healthy. I want to do this, but you have to mentally think through, like you're saying, take care of yourself mentally in order to prepare yourself to get that mindset to get healthy.
Totally, and there's so much to that. Really, quite often, this is just one piece where we're uncovering like someone doesn't feel worthy enough, but it's so much about how we really talk to ourselves. Those are often the same people that bring themselves down. Nothing is ever good enough. You're the perfectionist. And I'm saying this so lovingly because I am a quote unquote recovering perfectionist as well, where nothing is ever good enough, or you're trying and trying and trying, or at the end of the day, unless you're exhausted, it wasn't a productive enough day and so on. And so kind of stepping out of that and learning to rephrase some things. I mean, the first step is always identifying limiting beliefs or negative self-talk and all of that we have. We all have that in various areas. And if it's for you, not in the nutrition area, it's probably in finance or it's in God knows what, I don't know. But generally, we all have limiting beliefs and negative self-talk. And the first step is identifying it, but once we've identified it, we can override it. It's not fixed. We're not in a fixed mindset or fixed position. It's not going to happen overnight. You've probably accumulated and created these limiting beliefs over the course of 20, 30, 40, 50 years. I don't know. And therefore, they're not going to go away so easily. But if you keep telling yourself, weight loss is hard, eating healthy is hard, my life needs to be stressful, I'm not good enough, course you're going to believe it. And more than that, you're going to match your action to support that belief. It's not that you believe that and then your actions and are automatically going to align with what you believe about yourself. So if we can kind of tackle that from behind, if you can get started by telling yourself the opposite or the thing that you want to actually believe and act on, even if it sounds fake, probably for the first few months, that's a really good place to start with. But yeah, I hear that all the time. Oh, well, at least if I don't believe that, though, what kind of point is that? Why would I tell myself I'm worthy? Why would I tell myself I'm good enough? Why would I tell myself weight loss is easy? I truly don't believe it's easy. It's feeling hard. All my history, my past experiences, everything is telling me weight loss is hard or eating healthy is hard, is difficult, it's not fun. If you keep telling yourself that, it's never going to change and it's going to become a full self-fulfilling prophecy. But I find, for example, in addition to the things that you do when you wake up in the morning and going to right before going to bed, so kind of bookmarking your day with how you want to show up in the future, I think that sets a good tone for the day and helps you reconnect with your intention at night. So I'm a huge fan of journaling or even just like self-development books. Right, but that might not be for everybody. And I say that there is no one method for that kind of thing. Somebody might just say, I'm going to think of how I want to show up as while I take the dog for a quick walk 3 minutes in the morning. Someone else might say, while I'm in the shower, I'm quote unquote meditating on my mantra on what that would be. Or even while I'm driving, I'm going to make sure I'm putting in a really positive podcast as opposed to listening to the news. It's so important how we start our days, how we finish our days. It shouldn't be the first thing that you do is looking at your phone, and the last thing that you do is looking at your phone. It is shocking that the studies are showing that many, many people, the first and the last thing that they see before going to sleep is not their partner. No, 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 is their phone. Even if they sleep with the partner in the same bed, it's not their partner, it's their phone. And so if we can get out of that reactive state into intentionally starting our day and us creating how we want to start our day and how we want to feel throughout the day, as opposed to just reacting to everything that's around us, that's a really, really good place where we can influence our beliefs and our thoughts. And of course, the more visual and auditive reminders you have throughout the day, the better. So be it a positive screensaver or a fridge magnet that reminds you of what you want to achieve. Yes, those are added bonuses, but most of the time, if we have at least these bookmarks in place, I would encourage people to start there.
Yeah, and it's building the mental muscle along with the physical muscle. I mean, that mental muscle of it's you've got to strengthen the mental muscle. I mean, it's and the same thing as when you're breaking down that physical muscle. It's not easy. Sometimes it's painful. Sometimes you don't want to pick it back up. Sometimes you don't want to start. You don't want to go to the gym. You don't want to this or that. Well, just put 2 3 pound weights right at your bed. I mean, when you step out of bed, you step on those stupid 3 pound weights. Go shit. All right, so you pick them up, right? And you do a couple of these, couple of those. All right. Okay, I did it. Okay. But you at least did it. And then, like you said, document it. Write it down. Today, I did 3 curls with 3 pounds. I'm a freaking rock star. I'm an Arnold Schwarzenegger, right? I'm an animal, right? And then tomorrow, you're going to do 3 curls with 3 pounds, right? Because you're going to build that mental muscle along with the physical muscle.
Absolutely. And you said something really great because you said sometimes we've got to break that muscle and Exactly, that it's the challenges, it's the where it feels hard where the growth occurs. If we just stay in the place where it feels comfortable, where it feels easy, we're not gonna grow. Does that mean we always need to go balls to the walls in our workouts and push it to failure so that we so sore we can't walk for 3 to 5 days? No, of course not. But it is those periods of times where we're pushing through the challenges, through the discomfort that we're actually growing. And I hear that quite often with nutrition clients that we make some progress for a couple of weeks, weight is moving well, they're making some habit changes, and they can really feel like, oh, this is, I can sustain this, blah, blah, blah. And then they usually have a setback or they have a social event where they're like, oh, I didn't do so well, I fell into old habits, or it was a stressful day, I fell into old habits. And I was like, that's amazing. Number one, you came to me the next day and you're picking back up your habits the next day already. It's not that you've fallen into like all or nothing thinking, oh, well, I'm gonna start January 1st or whatever. This is, good enough. And number two, this is your quote unquote old self coming back to test you, coming back to just whisper in your ear, remember how comfortable it was back here? Remember how you just did it all the time, this and that way? Why don't you want to like try that again? But it felt now you're feeling bad for that happening and you have seen how far you've already come. So the important part is just recognizing that this little old you is going to come back on a regular basis, but the distances between its reoccurrence is going to come be less frequent. So at first it might happen after 2 weeks, then it might happen after a month and a half, then maybe after 3 months. And so your old self is always going to come back, but as long as you keep recognizing that, you keep that awareness and you keep pushing into the resistance, realizing that that's where the change happens, you're golden. You're going to keep growing.
Yeah, yeah. I think of it as the little devil on your shoulder, and go do your workout. Don't do it. You want a cheeseburger. You know what I mean? And you gotta fight those devils. There's a guy named Zig Ziglar, old dude, speaker. He's been gone now, but I love Zig Ziglar. But he said, when he was fat, he goes, I was fat, so I was gonna not want to be fat anymore. So he goes, I got the old redhead. His wife called her the redhead. So he goes, redhead went and got me a pair of running shoes. And so the first day I got up and I ran to the mailbox and back. And the next day, I ran to the neighbor's mailbox and back. And the day after that, I ran to the next mailbox and back. And that's just how it started. It's like you don't need to get up and run a marathon, right? It's going to hurt. You're going to really be bummed you did that. But it's just these little incremental changes, right? It's like today, when I go to Starbucks and get my coffee, hopefully you don't go to Starbucks, but if you do and you get your coffee, don't have a quadruple mocha frappa lappa with this crap in it, right? Maybe just try regular cream the first time and then cut back. And it's just those little incrementals. We don't need to, like you said, it took 40, 50 years to get here. All right. We're not going to knock this out in a week.
I love that. That's really, I mean, first of all, the Zig Ziglar story is a beautiful example of that. And the small steps, that is what's going to make it sustainable. And unfortunately, often that seems not quote unquote sexy enough for people. They want something extreme, they want that challenge, they want to see results very quickly. And I totally understand that results are very motivating. We want to see some results in straight away because otherwise people do lose motivation, but we can't rely on motivation, and we do need to have a long-term vision, knowing that it's a lifestyle and knowing that it's an identity change that we need to pursue. And so, yeah, I mean, there are so many great books also on behavior and habit change, and anyone listening who hasn't read Atomic Habits by James Clear, I really, really recommend it, especially now before the new year. If you want to change or adapt or whatever, any kind of habit, this is going to be your Bible. But it does really state so nicely that the size of the goal needs to be the size of the habit needs to have the right size depending on where you're at the moment. As you mentioned, if you want to go from zero working out to 5 times per week, that is not just not good for your physiology, you're also not going to be able to stick with that. What's realistic? What can you actually maintain and sustain? I think that's so, so important. I actually have a client with whom I have just set the goal of her literally just driving to the gym 3 times per week. She doesn't even need to go in. And because she is battling an all or nothing thinking as well, she was like, what's the point of even me going? No, the point is not that you have the hardest workout and then you destroy yourself and you can't go back into the gym for another 2 weeks. The point is to create that habit of just going there. And the next step is going to be for her to just walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes, like literally walking. And I would be surprised if she wouldn't just be taken by like, oh, let's just do one machine and then I can go home or something like that. It usually builds up like that, but we need to create that habit because very often it can be difficult if we pick something too big and then we basically break a promise to ourselves, just demonstrating once again, oh, this didn't work. This was another failed method when we just went about it the wrong way. And I think that's a really big point where if we start with one area where we break a promise to ourselves, it's going to trickle into other areas. Because once you start with this, and this just starts with simple things like you set an alarm and you're a snoozer. I really, really, really dislike snoozing because it's like you're telling yourself you're getting up at 5 and then it turns into 5:20. That's no good. How we do anything is how we do everything. So that's gonna carry over into your punctuality the other times of the day, or it's gonna be like in the evening when you're actually supposed to go for a walk with your friend because you want to hit your steps or whatever. Yeah, no, maybe not today. It's raining a little bit. I think I'm gonna cancel. So if you allow that little, as you mentioned, that little other devil on your shoulder to sit there, even just tapping on your shoulder, like, oh, just snooze again, just snooze a little bit longer. You're gonna build that up more than that strength of I'm gonna follow through with my word no matter what. I am the kind of person that if I set a goal or if I say I'm going to do something, I'm going to build that confidence and strength. And if you only have the goal of driving to the gym and going back,
That's awesome.
that's something you can reasonably easily do as opposed to having a super hard workout 5, 6 times in a row or per week, and then you're ending up canceling a few times because you're way too sore.
Well, I love that saying, how you do anything is how you do everything. I mean, I love that. That's a great saying. And the truth of the matter is, I mean, I do not like the gym, so I don't go to the gym. I mean, I've always had a gym at my house. I mean, even if it's just some old, I mean, I've got weights that I bought from some dude when I was 12 years old. I still have them, these dumbbells. I mean, they're lead. They just nothing happens to them, right? They last forever. And you just set them up in the backyard. And like I said, you have a couple 3 pounders, 5 pounders, whatever, and you do body exercises. Maybe you don't can't even do a push up. I mean, after I blew out my shoulder, I couldn't even do knee push ups, or they call them girl push ups or whatever. It just took time to get back. Doing a pull up was just not going to happen for me, right? So you just find ways to get healthy without coming up with barriers. It's so easy to go, well, I can't do this because of that. It's like, dude, that guy doesn't have any legs, okay? he's he's on the ski team. I don't even want to hear it out of you, right? Because there's always a way to get healthy, whether it's to eat healthy, whether it's to get some sort of exercise. It's like grounding, right? It's like I make my 2 year old grandson take his shoes off and walk on the grass with me. And for the longest time, he couldn't do it, right? The grass just freaked out his feet. He's like, I don't like this grass. I don't want to, he couldn't talk, but he just made it clear he didn't want it. He's like, put my shoes back on. But now that he does it, it's like just get yourself I know people, and it happens to all of us, that literally haven't had their feet on the ground in weeks. Weeks. Right? I mean, get your ass on the grass, right? I mean, don't you think so? I mean, get some fresh air, get some grounding, just sit out in the sun for 10 minutes, right?
Yeah, like really, once again, we try to overcomplicate or look for that magic pill and that simple solution when it really comes down to the fundamental basics of how much do we sleep? What's our sun daylight exposure? How connected are we to nature? And by nature, I mean you don't need to live in a forest, but every now and then go into a park and look at something green or make the effort of, as you say, like there's even grounding mats nowadays if you live really, really urban or in the middle of the city. So those are some really foundational things that don't seem to necessarily shift a lot straight away. but in accumulation, they make such a big difference. And I think you made such a good point when it comes to the exercise. It's not about the optimal method. The optimal method doesn't matter if you don't stick with it. I can give you the best meal plan. I can give you the best training plan. I can give you like literally out of everything. If you don't stick with it, there is no point. And a really big underestimated factor is what people enjoy. And while we shouldn't necessarily only, I know how contradictory that sounds to what I said earlier about something difficult and embracing the discomfort. But I mean more with that something that feels reasonably easy that has less of a barrier to use. So if you enjoy going to a group fitness class or a yoga class more than you enjoy going and doing some weights, even though weights might hypothetically be more optimal for your posture or whatever it might be, please go to the exercise class because you're actually going to stick with it. And with nutrition as well, if someone tells you, hypothetically, eating 3 times per day would be most optimal, and you need to stop eating at 6 p.m. to allow enough time for your digestion before you go to sleep, blah, 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 blah. But you don't come home from work until 7:30 and you actually like having an afternoon snack. Please, by all means, eat 5 times per day and have your last meal at 8 p.m. It like the minutia doesn't matter if we have the big basics like sleep, like daylight exposure, like the right food quality in place. And you also mentioned just barriers overall. And Atomic Habits it really gives us wonderful tips and tricks how we can minimize barriers to everything. So first of all, barriers to, let's again go back to the example with the gym. Often we think, oh, the best gym is like 20 minutes from here and it has the sauna and it has the best personal trainer. Well, if there's a gym 2 blocks from you, please go to that gym because it's more practical. And in essence, that is going to make it so much easier for you on a rainy day when the bed is calling your name to get out and just go to that close gym. And it applies to literally everything. If we put the fruit on the counter as opposed to the cookies, you're going to be more gravitating towards the easier accessible fruit. And if you keep the cookies at the very back where you actually have to reach up and maybe even get a stool to get them, it's going to make it harder. And I spoke to someone the other day and we were talking about apps where we can order food from. Because unfortunately, even here in Latin America and everything, they're becoming super popular. You can just order anything at the whatever. And I just said, well, I don't actually, I have uninstalled those apps. And he was like, you never order from there? I'm like, no, on occasion I do. But when I do, I have to go through the barrier of downloading the app again and then ordering and then deleting it again. And I mean, it sounds so stupid, but it's that extra barrier where sometimes I think twice. I'm like, actually, I still have my food in the fridge. Whatever, I'm just gonna eat that. And on occasion, I do choose to order something, but then it's very conscious. And I made the specific decision, no, today I'm gonna treat myself. I want that today. So, and I mean that works for everything. If you have a spending habit on XYZ or whatever, like deleting that app, deleting that subscription, is just very easy, or is one way to create a barrier that we want to have. And then there are other ways where we can remove barriers, like for example, having your groceries delivered as opposed to going to the store with your 3 kids that are crying and you're just in a rush and whatever. So you're coming home to the groceries that are already there. You chose in a moment where you were in a relaxed state, where you made a conscious decision of what you actually want. And yeah, there are some wonderful methods. So again, anyone listening who hasn't read Atomic Habits by James Clear cannot recommend it highly enough.
Yeah, yeah. And the what you said is so important because I've always just gone by the 80-20 rule. Many times in my life, it's been the 90-10 rule. Well, if I do 80% of the time, I eat really clean, really healthy, which I enjoy. And 20% of the time, if I eat something stupid or go to In-N-Out Burger or do something like that, it's like, all right, well, who cares? You know what I mean? I'm not trying to, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, and I'm not trying to be, completely crazy about it. So you have to treat yourself, like you said, the times where you go, screw it. I'm going to do this, right? And there's so many times where you go, that didn't even taste good. It's like I so much more enjoy the clean foods because you've just gotten so used to it that that treat isn't really even a treat anymore. It just didn't even taste that great, you know?
Mhm. Well, I mean, good points there. I love that philosophy because that truly is what I try to teach people as well. And that's coming from a place where, as you mentioned in your intro, I was trying to force myself into various diets as well, where I just restricted myself, and all of them work to an extent, like paleo, low carb, whatever. But I always felt restricted. I felt, okay, how do I enjoy my grandma's cake today, though? That doesn't fit in my paleo diet. Oh, well, screw it. Okay, I'll start again on Monday. Or how do I go on date night when I'm on low carb? Well, okay, screw it. I'll do it on Monday. And that's such an unhealthy relationship to have with food. And not just that, it's really just not optimal for your physiology either. So I love what you said because that's a really wonderful foundational approach if we're just thinking of like foods that we should have more of and foods that we should have less of. I do think that overall, really, sometimes people think too much about what's enjoyable, what do I crave right now, what do I want right now, and if we don't have a specific guideline at all. Like if we're not saying to ourselves, the majority of the time, I'm going to have these whole foods, I'm going to focus on vegetables and proteins and so on. Then if we're overwhelming ourselves with decision making all the time. Oh, what do I fancy for breakfast? Oh, what do I want for lunch? Blah blah blah. You always have these decisions to make, as opposed to having three go-to breakfasts or so that you know are healthy, that afterwards you know you will feel good, two, three lunches on rotation, maybe a little bit more variation for your dinner. But generally speaking, not every meal that we eat needs to be the most amazing one that tasted so, so good. And we can achieve a lot through working with herbs and spices as opposed to with lots of high calorie sauces. And I mean, we do need to acknowledge that adjusting or getting our taste buds to adjust does sometimes take a while. So when I start working with people, sometimes they're like, "Oh, this tastes kind of bland. I wish I really miss this and that, and I want to have my fries here." And we need to recognize that when we're mostly used to eating out or foods that are very processed, of course, they're going to have the additives of extra oils, extra salt, extra sugar, and those are all flavor enhancers. So going from that to eating kind of steamed vegetables with herbs and a sriracha sauce is of course not going to taste quite the same, but being a little bit of an adult to yourself and telling yourself, for the first few weeks I'm going to eat something just because I know it's good for me, and then I know my taste buds over the course of time are going to adapt to that, and I'm eventually actually going to end up craving that. And then that really happens. Like I have people that they don't enjoy high protein foods. They don't enjoy any kind of vegetables. And after a while, or when they go away on a trip and they come back, having had more processed foods over that time, they're like, Lisa, I was craving a salad. Can you imagine? I'm like, woohoo, that's amazing. I love it.
Well, that brings you to a couple of things that I saw on your website. Um, One of them was about either fixing a metabolism, or if you've got a broken metabolism, can you have a broken metabolism? You know, I think we earn our metabolism. I mean, we're born with a perfect metabolism, right? And then we hurt it by our diet and our exercise and our sedate lifestyle, right? So we can kickstart, refire that metabolism anytime we want, can't we?
Well, I mean, that's a really great question. And I think sometimes people use that a little bit as not an excuse, but sometimes we might have heard that, oh, as we're getting older, my metabolism is just going to slow down. It's just normal to get fatter as we're older. It's just part of life. And that's absolute bullshit. It's really not true. I mean, I think the research shows that from the age of like 65 or 70 is like the most minute decrease in metabolic output, but let's say it's like 0.05% or something like that. So really this cannot be used as an excuse. What's much more obvious showing in the research is that it's just our lifestyle that's changing. So for example, in your 30s, 40s, people have kids, they get even busier with work, they get stuck more driving from A to B. And so then, of course, they might be gaining a little bit more weight. but it's not that their metabolism per se has slowed down. It's that they've become less active, or they have maybe indulged a little bit more in wine than before, and so on. And then, of course, throw in a little bit of hormonal disturbances in perimenopause and menopause, and men also go through andropause and so on. But again, that's not a reason why we cannot lose body fat or why we cannot build muscle. There's very clear data on the fact that we can, maybe at a slower rate than at other times of life, but we can in fact still do both of these things or achieve both of these things. So that's just to kind of preface the conversation that our metabolism doesn't necessarily slow down that way. Now, can we quote unquote break our metabolism through other things like dieting too much? That's often what people think, oh, I've been, on a diet for 10 years. I just heard that I have a broken metabolism. That's why I can't lose weight. Um, Mm, Yes and no. So we cannot break our metabolism. Our metabolism can adapt. Yes, that is very different to breaking though, because it insinuates that we can repair it as well. Whereas if it's something is broken, it's very difficult to repair it. So it does adapt. So what I mean by that is if indeed we have gotten used to a certain amount of calories. So let's just say maybe your maintenance calories, so meaning the amount of calories that you burn is and the amount of calories that you consume is 2000 at the moment, and you want to go on a diet because you've just put on a little bit of holiday weight, and now you're consuming 1600 calories and your weight goes down quite nicely. Okay, cool. After a few weeks, maybe months, your body is going to realize there is less food going in, so it's kind of gonna down regulate because it's really smart. Your metabolism just wants to keep you alive.
Mhm.
And what used to be your maintenance is not now a little bit lower, and you're not losing at as fast of a rate at 1600 as you were before, and maybe you're plateauing altogether and not seeing any drop anymore at all. Okay, so you're thinking, now I need to drop my calories even further, so you're going to 1400 or so, and then for another couple of weeks, you might see some drop, and then it's plateauing again. But at some point, you can't really go any lower, even though you're probably not at your goal weight yet. So that's where we have that quote unquote broken metabolism or adaptive metabolism where people think, oh, I'm doing everything that I used to be doing and it's not working anymore. Well, there are a couple of methods to get out of that. But the first one that I would always say is to double check if you're really just consuming that low amount of calories, because sometimes people are not quite aware of how much they're actually eating. And that's not to say that it's to evil will or that they're lying or anything like that. It's often just we forget about the creamer we put in our coffee. We forget about the extra licks and bites that we take of our child's plate. We forget about the salad dressing that we put on top of XYZ or the oil that we're cooking with. So sometimes there are calories that we're not aware of, and when you thought you were actually only eating 1200 calories, you might be eating 1700. It's very, very easy to underestimate how much you're truly eating. So I always want to encourage people to double check how much they're truly eating. And maybe it's as simple as, oh, wow, okay, I'm realizing I'm actually eating way more. Never mind, I just need to adapt a little bit and really record everything that I'm actually eating. But yeah, let's go back to the scenario of your body is actually, you're actually only eating very low amount of calories. You can also get your metabolism to readapt to a higher intake. So what we need to do in those cases is we take you through a what's called a reverse diet. We just essentially strategically increase your calorie intake again, kind of to send your metabolism the message, hey, we're no longer in a hunger phase. There's actually plenty of food around. You can ramp up again and burn more again. I often refer to it a little bit as your laptop is no longer plugged in. That's kind of what happens after a while when you're having an adaptive metabolism. So, meaning when your laptop is plugged in, that's kind of when you're eating enough and everything is firing high. You have the brightest resolution, all the backup processes are running, and so on. And then you unplug your laptop. That's kind of you go on a diet. And for quite some time, everything is going to run just as normal. But after a while, it might just stop being as bright. It might stop doing all the backup processes. And that's what happens with your metabolism as well. Your hormones might not function quite as well. You might not be gesturing as much anymore, and you might not have as much energy for certain other things. And so by bringing those calories back up to what your maintenance level should actually back be is you plug your laptop back in, and slowly over time you build that confidence from your body again of like, okay, there's food around, I can actually burn properly again. And if we maintain that for a while until the quote unquote battery is charged again, you have your body's trust again, and next time you cut the calories again, it should work again. So nobody's metabolism is truly broken. It might be very adapted if you have dieted for a really, really long amount of time and you spend, let's say, more than half of a year of the year on average dieting, which I do often see in clients that they really go from one diet to another. In that case, it takes a little bit longer to restore your body's trust, but it can be done.
So kind of like we're just computers, we're going to reboot. We're going to reboot ourselves. Then, and the thing that you touch on is really important too. The people who get too much into counting calories, like I'm watching everything, and unfortunately, in America, they're very tricky, right? So you have to be careful. You're not just, you're watching some of the things you're putting. Like I'm gonna eat margarine instead of butter because margarine is supposed to be better for me than butter. Wrong, wrong, Sparky. Put the margarine in the garbage, right? I'm gonna go to Diet Coke instead of regular Coke because it's better for me, right? I'm gonna go ahead and eat sugar-free this instead of that, right? And I'm gonna eat fat-free this instead of that. I'm gonna eat an entire Edam's cheesecake because it says fat-free because I can do that, right? I mean, so when you're counting calories, you have to understand there's so much hidden sugar in everything, and the sugar becomes caloric, and it becomes carbohydrates, and it's just poison for the body. The additional salt, the additional fat that's stored in everything, because like you said before, like with fast food, you go, oh well, this tastes bland, or I don't like this. Well, if you eat a Big Mac 5 days a week, everything else is going to taste bland, right? Because it's just loaded with fat, salt, and sugar. So, you if you're trying to not only just watch your calories, but also get a more whole diet, right? More whole proteins, more whole grains, more whole fruits and vegetables, and don't be reading labels because that stuff shouldn't even have a label. Right?
Well, no, that's such a good point. Like really focusing on minimally processed foods is
Yeah.
like such a wonderful place to start, and it simplifies things. The beautiful thing that happens with that is also that we're going to be more satiated. We're going to be so much more satiated. Like even if you going back to the calorie point, if you eat a 500 calorie meal of minimally or not processed foods versus 500 calories might be the same macros, might be exactly the same protein, carbs, and fats, but from something that's like a protein bar and I don't know, like a high fiber, whatever diet food, cereal or whatever, you're going to be a lot more satiated after the whole foods meal because I mean, by definition, your body still has to do more of the processing than with the processed food. And I do also see that a lot with people that come from that always dieting kind of mindset. They have developed such a unhealthy quote unquote sweet tooth. It's not for sugary things, but it's for always having that sweetener or something. So they go from their whatever diet breakfast to then they have gum in their mouth, then they have the maybe Americano with 5 shots of sugar-free, quote unquote sugar-free syrup, and then more gum, and like they always have to have something in their mouth, but never feel satiated. That's really two things that I see very, very often. Always that kind of like I call it grazing because essentially I think that that's what it is. It's like a cow. You always need to have something in your mouth, and so you go from one to another, but you're never fully satiated. Then if you allow yourself to have a whole food meal, a proper meal, and then a few hours between your meals so that you actually have time to do some living, to work, to focus on something else, because that's another thing that I hear often is that constant food noise. If you always think about food and that food noise really comes like you finish your meal and you're already thinking about your next meal and your snacks in between and so on. And that's one of the things where and I don't really even want to get into that topic, but where those weight loss drugs that are so popular at the moment and so widely available, unfortunately, but where we do hear some positive things about them in the sense of them eliminating the food noise. But lo and behold, we can do that in a natural way, ideally as well. I'm not saying or judging anyone who is taking any weight loss drugs, and again, that's a topic for another time. But again, if we can eliminate the food noise with focusing on whole foods, on having more satiating things that way, then I think that's a really, really, really great place to start. Just thinking about what has no label because it doesn't need it, what is not processed at all, or maybe minimally processed like oats or rice or quinoa or whatever. That's totally fine. But just not so many things out of a package with 20 different ingredients.
Exactly. And like you said, none of this is food shaming, body shaming, exercise shaming, lifestyle shaming. None of this is that. It's just we understand we live in a instantaneous society, right? I mean, you send someone a text, if you don't get a text back, you're like, what the hell's going on? All right. What an asshole. Where's the text back? You know what I mean? We're like this instantaneous society, and it's the same thing with weight. It's like, let's just jab yourself with stuff, and then, you'll lose 50 pounds tomorrow. It's complete insanity. But if that's what someone needs to get there, not that stuff, because you're on it for the rest of your life. It's a life sentence. But if there's things that you need to do to get you to get started, well, that's your choices, and we wouldn't judge you on that. But there's something that you mentioned in your bio, um, nutritional periodization. What is nutritional periodization?
Hmm. Yeah, and that really goes nicely with what you were asking about metabolism earlier. So nutritional periodization essentially just means coming up with a plan or a bigger plan for how you want to lose weight or gain muscle or whatever, than just saying, oh, I want to get to 140 pounds. Because most people they think their idea of creating a plan is setting a goal weight. But what that usually leads to is number one, you don't really know like how aggressive or how fast or how much you can expect per week. And then if the expectation or if your outcomes don't match whatever you were thinking, because you thought, oh, 4 or 5 pounds per week is totally normal. Think so. Or I'm going to get to 140 pounds, so losing 50 pounds within the next 12 weeks is realistic. No, I don't think so. So, like creating an actual plan according to your goal and realizing that if it's a larger goal, maybe you need to break it up a little bit because you should be considering when are you going on vacation? When is your birthday? How many weeks is actually realistic? Like I personally don't like to take people through a weight loss phase for longer than, let's say, 16, 20 weeks max, depending on how much they have to lose. And if it's a larger amount, if someone has 50 or 100 pounds to lose, I do want to make a bit of a break in between that because, first of all, your body needs some time to catch up. Your mind needs some time to catch up and reestablish, okay, I'm geared up again to diet. It's not that much fun. So we wanna take that in intervals, perhaps. But the more important part is also once we get to the goal weight, we want to make sure we're not just saying, okay, see you later, Johnny. Good luck with the rest of your life and so on. I'm sure you can maintain that now because most people listening have probably lost weight in the past, but they've probably also gained it back and maybe even more. And that happens for a number of reasons, but one of them is that we don't have a plan for after the plan. So we would just think, I want to get to my goal weight, and then that's where the thinking stops. We either go back to our previous habits And at that point in time, all of our intuition, all of our hunger cues are actually going to tell us to put the weight back on because your body wants you to be safe, and therefore it actually wants you to have a little bit of extra cushion, and it's going to probably tell you to put on even more in case there's another hunger period coming. So if you listen to your intuitive cues right after you've done a diet, you're probably gonna gain the weight back. The other scenario, of course, which I already kind of alluded to, is that people are so afraid of gaining the weight back that they're just staying in this really low calorie state. And then over the course of the time, their metabolism doesn't like it, their hormones don't like it, they run into problems, especially if they also exercise a lot, if they have a very high stress life, then their sleep suffers. All these things trickle down from there if we stay in a low calorie state for too long. So the nutritional periodization means that after our dieting phase, we're also including a what is called a reverse dieting phase. So slowly but steadily, we increase the amount of food, the increase the amount of calories strategically again. We don't just say from one day to another, okay, from 1400 calories, now we're going to go back up to 2000 because again, your body wants to store that as body fat. But if we say, okay, we're going to add just an extra yogurt and an apple for the first week. And then the second week, we're going to add a little bit more potatoes to your dinner. And then, like, you build on that, you're teaching your metabolism again to fire while not putting that on as weight and while improving your hormonal health again and so on. And then another phase, of course, we could add a specific muscle gaining phase. Many women actually also want to build more muscle, but of course, men also. But so that can be done in a very strategic way also, as opposed to just saying, oh, well, I'm going to eat more, and then you kind of balloon and you add a lot more fat than necessary. So being strategic about that in the same manner can be done too. But we also have a maintenance phase, which is actually a phase that's, in my opinion, the least utilized one, and that is where we just practice maintaining where we're at. Most people are really good at losing weight, gaining weight, losing weight, gaining weight. You're constantly fluctuating, but just practicing to stay in a place where you're feeling good, where your hormones are in a good place. That's sometimes where a nutrition coach or any kind of coach comes in most helpful. You think, oh, no, I can do this. I've done this all the time. But then maybe you haven't learned how to navigate your holiday, how to travel with while maintaining your weight, while going through Christmas and all that while maintaining your weight. That is, in my opinion, where the true art is at. If you can maintain a body that feels good, that looks good for the majority of the year. I would honestly like to set that as a challenge to anyone listening. It shouldn't be your goal to get to a specific weight. It should be your goal to maintain a specific well-being place for a year. And then once you've achieved that, extending that goal to, always, perhaps, unless you want to intersperse that with some muscle gaining phases or maybe a little bit leaning out for a beach vacation or so. That's absolutely fine. Totally, totally fine.
Yeah, and that yo-yo dieting is just so wicked to your body. Oh my gosh, it just tears up your body. It does so much more damage than good, on the yo-yo dieting. But I'm old, so there's times when I want to go back and work out like I used to, just stupid bench press and just heavier weights, right? And now that I'm in my 60s, it's like I want to for my body to back off on that and do different types of body movements, different types of workout, worry about testosterone levels, slipping. My wife is a big workout person. She gets it too. She can't work out the way she used to. Um, and then, going deep into menopause, so as your body changes, as we age, or as, like you said, when you lose weight, I mean, if you're a 30-year-old dude and you're 150 pounds overweight, right, you've got all sorts of metabolic problems, right? Metabolic problems, right? You got low testosterone, you've got cholesterol, you've got all these things. You've got the body of an 80-year-old. Now that 30-year-old guy drops that 150 pounds, he's a completely different man in every way. But also as we get older, I mean, I've got another 40 years in me, right? I mean, I want to get to about 110 years old. So Um, we need to adapt. There's not one set thing, and I like that's what you talked about. There's not one set. Here's a cookie cutter thing we're going to put you in, and you're going to do that forever, right?
Well,
I love how you
exactly.
do you're what you go away from that.
Absolutely. I mean, there's no one set thing between people from one person to another. And I think the second one that you're alluding to now is sometimes a lot harder for the ego because we think, "Oh, I was able to do that in my 30s, or I was when I was doing this and that diet and this and that training 20 years ago or even 2 years ago, it worked well. Why is it not working now? Why is it not working now?" And then we look at, well, right now your stress is a lot higher. You have a deadline at work. You now have a second child. You haven't been sleeping very regularly or well, and you've just entered perimenopause. How are you expecting it to work exactly the same way as 2 or 5 years ago? But that's I totally recognize how hard that is for the ego, for ourselves, and just as you say, you want to go back to bench pressing this and that, and we have I catch myself with that in mind as well because I had some issues with like my sciatic nerve a while ago, and before that I was deadlifting whatever 240 pounds and no problem, and now it's like, oh, okay, I'm going to start with 150, and that is hard. So you need to learn to kind of like find the grace for yourself in whichever phase of life. And sometimes doing your best might be way less than what it was a few years ago, and that's fine too. But as long as we put in the effort, and as long as I think we have certain non-negotiables for ourselves, and that could be I'm gonna hit my 8 to 10,000 steps per day, or even if it's just 6,000, or I'm going to do some kind of movement 3 times per week, even if it's just a yoga class on YouTube while I'm winding down at night or so. That is something, but having like a few non-negotiables and moving away from that I need to be perfect, I think that's really, really so key. Again, as coming from a recovering perfectionist, it's something that you can learn, you can practice as well.
Yeah, and you have to listen to your body. You can't my rotator cuff, my knee from snowboarding. I mean, you got to listen to your body, right? You have to adjust. You also have to listen to amazing professionals like yourself. I mean, the time's flying here. You've been amazingly giving with your time. I could talk to you forever. This is obviously a topic that I just enjoy and I love health and fitness. I really wish we could heal more people through that. It's hard, but it's easy, right? I mean, it's hard, but it's easy. So, I always finish a podcast with one last question. Although I don't know, I could talk to you forever, but um, it doesn't have to be about health, nutrition, mental. It doesn't have to be anything. It could be about your travels, whatever. But I always ask people the last question. I say, if there's something that you can leave us with, that we go, this is something that's important to Lisa. Something that's special. It could be a quote, it could be whatever. What would be something that you'd like to leave us with from your heart there that you believe in?
Well, going back to the beginning, I know we only have one life to live and we only have this one body. And so I truly think if someone's listening to this and they feel like they're not where they want to be in terms of their physical health, you are the only one who's going to come to rescue you to take action. There's not going to be anybody who's tapping on your shoulder. Oh, by the way, Lisa, I know that you can do a lot better. And by the way, you should fix this and you should eat differently. But no, you need to take action. But again, coming from a loving place and seeing that if there's something in someone else that you're admiring about their physique or where you think how they eat, how they're able to have things in moderation, you can achieve that too, but you need to go after that. And to your point, Gary, earlier, there is no harm in asking people for help. Again, I'm German, so I was brought up in with the mindset of no, anything you can do on your own. Don't ever ask for help. You need to struggle through things yourself. I have worked very hard to unlearn this belief or to eradicate this belief and learn that if there are coaches, if there are people that are ahead of me, I need to and want to utilize them as inspiration and as people to help me grow so much faster, because otherwise it's just silly to spend and waste so much extra effort. And truly, if nutrition and training is not your passion, then your energy and gifts should be spent on what you're good at. And having someone that takes your hand and helps you with nutrition and training, I think can be a really wonderful way to free up some mental space for what you're good at as the listener.
Yeah, there's a to quote another brilliant guy, and thank you for that. That was beautiful, and I agree 1,000%, with what you said there, and it just ties in. There's a guy named Jim Rohn, and Jim Rohn used to always say, when you're in an airplane and the oxygen masks fall, put your mask on first, right? Because if you aren't there you can't take in it. You can't help anyone else if you're not there. And it's the same with your health and your body and your mind. If you're not whole, you can't help anybody else. So take care of yourself first. And that's why we have you, Lisa Franz. You're going to help us all get better. So how do we how do we find the amazing Lisa? I mean, we're going to put everything on the podcast. We're going to put your contacts, your website and all that. But if you want to share something with us, how do we all get a hold of you and why?
Yeah, so I'm on most platforms under my company name. So Nutrition Coaching and Life, that's also the website name, that's the LinkedIn name, and on YouTube as well. I'm probably most active on Instagram. I also try to provide some freebies to get people started. So just go and check out the website or always send me a message. I love hearing from people how they find me. So if you are listening to this and just let me know, hey, I found you through Gary's podcast, then that would be lovely.
That would be fun. All right, kiddo, you're amazing. You obviously practice what you preach. You're a gem, and I know you're saving and helping a lot of people, and that's a huge gift. So thank you
Thank
for
you so
that.
much.
And
Thank you
thank
for
you for
having me
joining us.
on.
All right, guys. Well, look for Lisa France on her site. Let her help you get healthy. And in the meantime, we'll see you guys next time. Thanks, everybody. Thanks again for joining us on another episode of What If You Could podcast. Please subscribe, like, share, and give us any feedback. We'd love to hear it. And remember, if you can dream it, you can do it. See you next time.